The average American family paid an extra $5,200 last year and never saw the invoice. No return address, no explanation. No line item that said war tax. Just a wallet that stopped working and a paycheck that stopped being enough. That money did not vanish into thin air. It moved through fuel pumps, grocery receipts, credit card statements, heating bills, mortgage rates, and retirement accounts that swung violently every time a battlefield shifted 6,000 miles away. Putin does not need to invade Ohio to make Ohio pay. He already built something cleaner than invasion, something invisible, something that reaches into a kitchen in Pennsylvania without ever crossing a border. Picture a 58-year-old man in western Pennsylvania. He drives a pickup, he works with his hands, he does not wake up studying maps of Donbass. He does not know every village near Pokrovsk, but he knows the gas pump, he knows the grocery aisle. He knows his son cannot afford the mortgage on a starter home. He knows his 401k jumps every time the world catches fire. That man may not follow Ukraine every day, but Ukraine reaches him through price. Modern war no longer needs to knock on your door. It walks in through the receipt. For years, the loudest voices made it sound simple. Ukraine costs too much. Ukraine drains American weapons. Ukraine steals attention from home. It sounds practical. It fits perfectly into a 30-second political clip. But clean arguments can be catastrophically wrong. The real question was never whether Ukraine costs money. It does. The real question, the one Moscow desperately needs buried, is what America pays if Ukraine falls. Because once Americans ask that question honestly, the debate changes completely. It stops being a charity. It becomes math. Hard math, strategic math. The kind of math every homeowner understands when the fire is still outside the fence, but moving fast. Look at the chain. Putin does not want discussed. A Russian missile hits Ukrainian infrastructure. Black Sea grain routes shake. Fertilizer markets move. Energy traders add risk. Shipping insurance climbs. Inflation gets another shove. The Federal Reserve feels pressure. Credit tightens. A small business in Arizona delays hiring. A young couple in Michigan waits another year to buy a home. A retired worker in Florida watches his savings bleed because a dictator decided borders are negotiable. That is how a battlefield becomes a bill. A Russian tank in eastern Ukraine eventually shows up at an American gas pump. The distance is an illusion, the price is not. So when someone says stop spending on Ukraine, stop and ask what comes next. Does Russia become peaceful? Does Europe become safer? Does China become more cautious when watching Taiwan? Does Iran suddenly respect American power? No. The opposite happens. Every enemy of the United States reads the same signal simultaneously. If pressure lasts long enough, America gets tired. If the bill looks annoying enough, Washington steps back. If propaganda gets loud enough. Democracies argue while autocrats advance. The danger is not one town in Donbass. The danger is teaching the entire world that American patience is weaker than enemy brutality. The United States approved a possible sale to Ukraine of more than 1,500 extended-range JDAM bombs and related equipment worth about $373.6 million. To some voters, that sounds like another foreign bill landing on an already stretched table. But pause. What is actually cheaper, a controlled $373.6 million weapons package that keeps Russia bleeding in Ukraine, or a Europe where Putin learns that America quits when pressure rises? What is cheaper, bomb kits today, or a NATO emergency tomorrow? What is cheaper, helping Ukrainians hit Russian targets now, or sending American troops to reassure the entire eastern flank when the next crisis arrives? Putin is not only fighting Ukraine, he is conducting an experiment on the American attention span. Can he make this war feel expensive enough, confusing enough, and distant enough for voters to look away? He does not need Americans to love Russia. He only needs Americans to get tired of Ukraine. Dictators do not always win by winning fast. They grind, they wait, they bet that free societies grow bored before occupied societies break. Ukraine is proving that bet wrong. America cannot afford to prove it right. Weakness does not lower the price of peace. it raises the price of the next war. If Russia wins by outlasting the West, the next crisis will not be smaller. It will be larger, closer, and far more expensive. China studies Taiwan with sharper eyes. Iran reads the Middle East differently. North Korea feels the air change. NATO's eastern flank demands more troops. More missiles, more air defense, more American money immediately and indefinitely. Energy markets price in fear. Food markets price in blackmail. Defense budgets rise anyway. The bill does not disappear. It matures with an interest that compounds faster than anyone wants to calculate. Stop pretending the choice is between spending money and saving money. That is not the choice. The choice is between paying a controlled price now and paying an uncontrolled price later. Ukraine is expensive the way insurance is expensive. Nobody enjoys the monthly premium. Nobody frames it and hangs it over the fireplace. You pay because one fire can erase everything you built over a lifetime. Ukraine is a firebreak. Bloody, imperfect, exhausted, still standing while it stands. It keeps a larger fire away from NATO territory, away from American troops, and away from a global shock that makes every household on Earth poor. Many Ukraine supporters lose ordinary Americans because they speak like they are moderating a symposium. Rules-based order, democratic values, international norms. Those words are not wrong. They are just not enough. A man coming home from a 12-hour shift does not want a lecture on liberal internationalism. He wants to know why beef costs more, why gas hurts, why his kid cannot buy a house, and why another overseas crisis should matter to a family barely staying above water. So say it plainly, Ukraine matters because chaos has a price, aggression has a price, retreat has a price, and that price reaches people who believed with everything they had that they were far from the map. Here is the blunt version. Ukraine is not asking American soldiers to die in Ukrainian trenches. Ukraine is asking for tools so Ukrainians can keep Russians from moving farther west. That difference is the entire point. If someone else is holding the line against a hostile power threatening American interests, the smart move is not to mock the cost. The smart move is to ask whether that line is cheaper than the next one. It is. The next line is NATO. The next line is American treaty obligations. The next line is the crisis where hesitation costs more than any preparation ever would have. Putin understands something too many Americans keep forgetting. Perception is a weapon, and sometimes the sharpest one on the battlefield. If Ukraine looks abandoned, Russia wins more than land. It wins a story that tells every undecided government on Earth that America is temporary, that Washington's promises expire every election cycle, that every enemy should keep pushing until American politics fractures under the pressure. That story would be worth more to Moscow than every village in Donbass combined. It would weaken America without firing a single shot at America. That is the real stakes. Not a border dispute. A global story about whether American resolve still means anything. Ukraine is not only holding the line, Ukraine is learning. Fast. Brutally fast. Faster than peacetime armies are designed or funded to learn. Every Shahed drone attack becomes data. Every Russian jammer becomes a problem that must be solved before dawn. Every destroyed vehicle becomes a design note. Every night raid becomes feedback that reaches engineers before the smoke clears. Ukraine is not just receiving American weapons. Ukraine is building the most comprehensive battlefield record of the next war that exists anywhere on Earth. Bills cost money. Blueprints change futures. That is why the legal door opening for Ukrainian weapons, ammunition, components, and defense technology to enter the American market is not a bureaucratic footnote. It is a reversal of the entire narrative. For years, Americans heard one direction, American weapons flowing to Ukraine. Now the door is opening in the other direction. Ukrainian battlefield-tested technology moving toward America. The removal of Ukraine from old import restrictions means the automatic wall comes down. That shift changes what Ukraine is. Aid flows one way. Serious military partnerships flow both ways. A country that only receives aid can be painted as a burden. A country that sends battlefield-tested technology back into the American defense market becomes something else entirely. It becomes useful. It becomes a source of lessons no simulation budget can buy. America has capital. Ukraine has battlefield receipts. The Pentagon simulates tomorrow. Ukraine is fighting it tonight. The United States can spend billions testing a system in a desert range, a naval exercise, or a classified simulation center. Useful, necessary, still fundamentally incomplete. Ukraine tests systems against an enemy that is actively trying to kill them before sunrise. Russian electronic warfare does not care about brand names or defense contracts. Winter Mud does not care about conference presentations. A drone either finds its target or fails. A sensor either cuts through interference or becomes another lesson paid for in blood. The cost curve, and why it should terrify the Pentagon. Modern war is becoming a knife fight between expensive platforms and cheap swarming threats. Russia sends waves of Shahed drones and decoys to exhaust air defenses. Ukraine cannot answer every cheap drone with a Patriot missile that costs millions of dollars per intercept. That is not a strategy. That is bankruptcy with a flag on it. So Ukraine adapts cheap interceptors, mobile fire teams, networked sensors, garage workshops turning overnight into production lines. Small teams building battlefield fixes before large bureaucracies can even name the problem. Ukraine has no luxury of waste. Every answer must be cheap enough, fast enough, smart enough, and numerous enough to survive contact with reality. That should make every senior Pentagon official sit up straight and stay there. A Pacific crisis will not be clean or slow. It could bring drone swarms over the Taiwan Strait, cyber attacks hitting ports. Simultaneously, cheap unmanned boats threatening ships that cost billions, decoys, draining interceptors designed for different threats, missiles hitting air bases before scramble orders, clear the tower, electronic warfare blinding sensors across entire operational theaters. 1,000 cheap problems can force billion-dollar systems into exhaustion. That is how a rich military gets defeated, not in one decisive blow, but stretched, drained, slowed, and made uncertain until the moment of decision arrives and the response is half a beat too late. Ukraine is showing America that the cost curve may decide the next war as much as raw firepower ever could. Black Sea naval drones have already demonstrated how unmanned boats can threaten ships that once looked entirely untouchable. Shahed attacks have shown how cheap airborne systems force expensive defensive decisions at scale. Russian jamming has confirmed that every drone war is simultaneously an electronic war. Distributed garage workshops have proven that a factory does not need a giant sign on its roof to change a battlefield. A basement can matter. A small team of engineers working through the night can decide whether a city keeps its lights on by morning. Ukraine is not replacing the American defense industry. America still has the capital, the scale, the satellites, the aircraft, the shipyards, and the global logistics reach that Ukraine does not and cannot. But the United States carries a dangerous institutional habit. It takes too long making expensive things perfect. Ukraine is learning at war speed how to make imperfect things lethal, cheap, and available right now. The military that wins the next conflict may desperately need both cultures operating together. American industrial scale and Ukrainian battlefield speed, American precision engineering and Ukrainian overnight adaptation, American resources and Ukrainian receipts written in blood. Moscow wanted Ukraine isolated, dependent, exhausted, and forgettable. Instead, Russia helped create something it never intended to build: a defense technology society forged under fire. Engineers became embedded in the front, coders became force multipliers, welders, mechanics, drone pilots, volunteers, and soldiers became one living, adapting learning network. That network takes losses, it breaks. It makes mistakes that cost lives, but it learns at a pace no peacetime institution can match. And learning under fire creates knowledge no white paper, no think tank report, no simulation exercise can fully replicate or replace. This is Russia's nightmare scenario. A Ukraine that only receives aid can be mocked as a drain on American resources. A Ukraine that exports battlefield lessons becomes something Moscow never budgeted for. It becomes an early warning system. It becomes a preview of every threat American forces may face in the next decade. And it becomes proof, written in the most expensive ink available, that adaptation beats prestige when the shooting starts. Everyone is studying the same laboratory. China is watching how drones change armor. Iran is watching how electronic warfare reshapes command. North Korea is watching how cheap weapons threaten expensive platforms. Every potential adversary is asking the same questions Ukraine is answering in real time, with real consequences attached to every wrong answer. These are not academic questions debated in comfortable rooms. They are the questions that determine whether American forces enter the next crisis with accurate maps or outdated assumptions. So here is the sharpest version of the case. Ukraine is not merely America's insurance policy against Russian expansion. Ukraine is America's most brutally honest early warning system. The place where tomorrow's battlefield logic is being written tonight in mud and electronic noise and garage workshops and drone strikes that happen too fast for traditional doctrine to process. Opening the American market to Ukrainian defense technology is not a bureaucratic gesture. It is recognition that battlefield truth has compounding value. And right now, Ukraine holds more battlefield truth than almost any nation on Earth. Putin wanted Ukraine to drain America. Instead, he may have accidentally built the cheapest, most comprehensive warning system America could have asked for before the next great power conflict. A country fighting in trenches today may be teaching the Pentagon precisely how to survive tomorrow. Ukraine is not on the bill. The bill is what happens if Ukraine falls. And the blueprint, the real strategic asset that no one in Moscow wanted America to notice, is what Ukraine is writing every single day it stands. So the question Washington keeps avoiding has a simple shape. Is Ukraine a burden on America? Or is it the cheapest warning system available before the next war arrives and the lessons suddenly cost American lives instead of American dollars? The next battlefield is already being written in real time. The only question that matters now is who reads the warning first. The warning is already on the table. Ukraine is writing it in drone strikes, jammed signals, shattered armor, and garage-built weapons that should make every serious country pay attention. Some people will still call it a burden. Others will recognize it for what it is: time-dated deterrence and a hard lesson bought before American soldiers have to pay for it directly. Where you stand on that question says a lot about how you see the next war coming. Share your take below. And stay with this channel if you want to read the battlefield before the headlines finally catch up.